Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. Literally meaning a person is a person through others. Or I am because you are. These are the values that are typical to traditional African communities. There is an understanding for the need of connection and community as humanity. And as the world has assumed the ways of the West, it seems that these values have gotten lost along the way. Empathy seems like it's dying amongst our society, and we are constantly divided. So I propose that we go back to our roots. Let us readopt the principles of the indigenous folks of our land, of this land. They knew what they were doing. I will take you through a journey of learning about the past, the people before us, and pinpointing how their lessons can, how their values can teach us lessons now. Of course, we'd have to know what indigenous values are. What is indigenous knowledge? UNESCO defines indigenous knowledge as the understandings, skills, philosophies developed by societies with long histories of their of interactions with their natural surroundings. For rural and indigenous peoples, local knowledge informs their decision-making about the fundamental aspects of day-to-day life. Essentially, they are in touch with their environment, and they work with what surrounds them for their optimal living. And society has failed indigenous people for a number of years through our treatment towards them. The existence of traditional and native communities in this country is quite ignored. The people of the country are unaware of the history of the first occupants of this land. We don't know their languages, we don't know their customs and practices, and we don't know the story of their life throughout history in South Africa. Indigenous knowledge has been sidelined when it comes to education and learning as well. We are taught how to code or solve Pythagorean theorem, or about logarithms, but not about the workings of connecting with our world, or traditional history. And not that the things that I just listed are unimportant, but what they do is that they teach us how to act and think as machines, but not as humans. For example, the system we run on is highly exploitative. It does not cater to the people that are not on top of the social and industrial ladder. The rich, this all about supply and demand. And the demand is quite big, so it's incredibly hard to keep up with. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer, essentially. There's a central importance about the individual, and absolutely no care about the collective. Which makes me think of something one of my teachers said to me when we were speaking about the evolution of human history. She said, we as humans do not really think about the ethical implications of the innovations that we introduce. And obviously the innovations and changes that we make are not all bad. However, there needs to be a balance. So how do we balance innovations and the needs that make us undeniably human? Well, I believe that we should look at integrating traditional indigenous values into modern life. We do not have to sideline one and uplift the other. It is possible to live in harmony with these values, with the new age. Continuing olden traditions in the modern age is absolutely not unheard of. In fact, it's quite common and normal in African communities, including my own. For example, in Xhosa communities, there is still a wide participation of umuluko. Ukuluka is essentially to go through a rite of passage. And it usually happens with a boy between the ages of 17 and 19. And they go to the mountains for about 2 to 3 weeks to participate in a ritual, to become a man and to also get circumcised. It's essentially about seclusion. Just like when people go on retreat to connect with their spiritual selves. They reside in the mountains to get away from the busy chaoticness of life. While in the mountains, they must be alone and only have the care of a group of older men called Amankagata and a young girl between the ages of 13 to 15 who is a symbol of purity but also provides them with the needs of social interaction. The men that are there are to provide wisdom, teach lessons about what it takes to be a man, and give advice and anecdotes on the journeys that they have taken in manhood, and just to essentially make sure everything goes as planned. This ritual, however, does sometimes prove to be controversial because some families take doing the ritual traditionally a little too seriously, and they do not get circumcised by a medical professional. Which just brings me back to my point. There needs to be a balance. We have the tools and the access of sterile, safe hospitals to provide us with the circumcision to take place. The lessons of the ritual are not going to be cancelled out just because the circumcision was done in a typically Western way. We have the safety of procedures and we have the lessons and the principles taught through tradition. They are both important and they work together. After umuluko is umpumo, which is essentially a confirmation ceremony. And after that, you would have umgidi. And personally, I remember attending my very first ever umgidi. I was 7 at the time, so I definitely did not completely understand the entire concept. But what I did know was that my big brother was becoming a man. Umgidi is different from umuluko. Umgidi is the celebration of when the family and friends receive their family member as a man. There is an abundance of music and fun and dancing and chatter and just lots and lots of meat. And after about 2 to 3 weeks of seclusion, the man is now surrounded by his family and friends, just to congratulate him on his journey, accept his newfound manhood, and recognize the changed person before them. Anyways, on the day of my brother's umgidi, I was all in. Okay, I got dressed in a monochrome outfit of my cultural wear. I was early with my mom and the other women in my family that were just making preparations, and I was just all around the house looking for things to help with. I like to joke that because I was wearing all yellow that day, that I was quite literally a busy bee. I was quite interested. And when the festivities started, I was up dancing. And I was lip syncing with the hymns because I didn't really know the songs, the lyrics to the songs, but you would think that I had done this before. And I was just so incredibly happy for my brother. However, I did have to reluctantly adjust to addressing him as Budi, rather than by his first name. But despite not knowing the full process and comprehending what it really meant, I knew that that day was about showing up and supporting my brother, my family, and I did that in the best way that I knew how. And this experience reminds me of a quote from Chinua Achebe's novel, Things Fall Apart. A man who calls his kinsmen to a feast does not do so to save them from starving. They all have food in their own homes. And when we come together in the moonlit village ground, it is not because of the moon. Every man can see it in his own compound. We come together because it is good for kinsmen to do so. And in my matured curiosity of this topic and tradition, I asked my brother what he learned and got from this experience. What I received from him was that the biggest takeaway was that it allowed him to be open with his elders. It opened the door. The fence between the youth as a young man and his elders was now opened. His older brothers, his older cousins, uncles, fathers, grandfathers, he was now able to communicate to them as a man, and he had found a new community in his manhood. And I just genuinely believe that society could use so much more of this. I feel like we struggle with a sense of belonging, or maybe a lack of sense of belonging, and everything feels so displaced nowadays. And having these opportunities to open doors, whether it's through culture, or religion, or traditions, or generations, it's so important to the lives of human beings. We learn and adapt to each other. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you need to travel up the mountains and go through this ritual. I just like to highlight the principle of connection and the valuable lessons that traditional customs hold that could apply to anybody. It applies to all of us. And personally, I'd always loved attending traditional events, even now. There's just this incredible warmth that fills my spirit being around the many people on my family tree. Just this last August, I had the opportunity to spend some time with my grandmother's side of the family. Now, it wasn't under the best circumstances, as we had lost one of my uncles, but it was still somewhat of a joyful experience. In the evening, after the funeral and the ceremonies were over, we gathered around the fireplace. Everyone was telling the most amusing stories in our mother tongue, mostly about the youth days of my late uncle, but their accounts were just so incredibly hilarious. I felt like through the storytelling, my uncle was alive. It also helped that the traditional food was just so warm, and it was well seasoned, and it was just so delectable. Oh my word. And despite that, and although we were in mourning and feeling all types of grief, I had a beautiful time with my family that evening. And having this bond, after being isolated for over a year in lockdown, a year of living the same day every day, it was incredibly re-energizing. And don't get me wrong, a greater sense of community is not the only thing native values bring. Adopting the systems of indigenous folks would be incredibly beneficial to our environmental issues world, and it would propel us forward to heal the negative impacts that we've had on the natural world around us so far. Native communities consider nature as sacred. They encompass practical ways to ensure there's a balance in their environment, so that environment can provide them with water and soil and shelter and medicines. And we could use some of the teachings on how to live harmoniously with nature. Instead of just taking, we should give back too. I mean, the climate crisis is incredibly alarming, and the big industries in the world contributing to most of the issue are either in denial or they are incredibly indifferent. Tribal societies were considered uncivilized and primitive for in the ways that they honored natural life and the animals in their ecosystems. But we genuinely should be looking towards those practices in an attempt to save our earth. I believe that we should implement federal policy that includes indigenous practices in preservation for our earth. We should be collaborating with them. Traditional knowledge can play a key role in ensuring that we have a sustainable ecosystem. Even just reducing the use of chemical drugs in medicine and introducing more natural ingredients into treatment plans. I believe we've sort of become dependent on the quick effects of drugs, which isn't good for us in the long run. Natural and herbal remedies have many, many health benefits, and they are less likely to cause harm. Integrating traditional medicine into society, deregulation and patenting and structuring them could work so well for our future. And speaking of future, we are the future of our new world. We will shape how our reality will look like. At some point, some of us will be responsible for further teaching the future generations. We will be teaching and guiding them, so we must start now to identify what matters in the core of our society, the core of humanity. And how do we want to leave this earth? With all this expanding and limitless knowledge that we have, we can be the ones to introduce indigenous and traditional values into the new age. We can be the one to integrate the core principles that uphold the needs of humans with our new day. We have overcomplicated life. And I believe that going back to basics may just help us solve the walls of our lives. Thank you.